Hey there, Trekies! Thanks for joining us on Buffer Time, the show where we get together for an hour each week and discuss the most important topic of the moment. We'll be answering the question, is Trek funny? And does the Orville do it better? Now we'll go around and introduce ourselves and any projects or causes we're stoked on. I'm Dustin from Best of Trek, Worst of Trek.
I'm Eve, and I'm starting my podcast eventually here when I get things sorted out, called Trouble Without a Cause, which is a music and teaching podcast.
I'm Scott of the almost did it again of the YouTube channel Opinions No One Cares About.
Hi, I'm Del. I have no YouTube channel, but I'm really excited to be watching Trek Central's 250K specials. The one that came out this morning was Who Would You Put on Star Trek Rushmore? So even though it's not my project, I still am really enjoying it, and I think other Treks would enjoy it too.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually Trek Culture and not Trek Central, but
Oh, I get them confused. Sorry.
Yeah, I watched that just before we came on here because for my 1K special for subscribers, I've asked a couple of people like Scott and other much smaller YouTubers the questions that they've been asking over the past month before they came out with the one today. And my answer to that, to the Mount Rushmore one, is every Native American in Star Trek. Just because it seems right.
Isn't it just one?
No, there's quite a few.
Well, no, because they're Voyager. Never mind. Voyager.
You got Chakotay. You've got the whole colony that Picard almost removed in TNG. You've got the TOS whole Native American-like culture that they meet.
Yep.
There's quite a few. And then there's the one that sacrificed himself for no apparently good reason at the end of that episode in Disco Season 4.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So there's quite a few that you could get on a Star Trek Mount Rushmore. Anyway, that's not our topic today. Our topic today is humor in Star Trek, and I think we've got to start with what most of us agreed is Trek's worst attempt at humor ever. Up the Long Ladder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they tried.
I thought it was really funny when I was 13, but watching it now, not so much.
Up the Long Ladder is which one? I'm not good with titles.
The Berloidy, the one
Irish.
with the Irish people.
Oh, the fake Irish.
Yeah.
No, they're actual Irish. Well, they're all fake people that aren't Irish playing Irish roles. Yes, you are correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that one in syndication when I was a teen, and I was just like, what is this? I'm like, how is Cole Meany not totally flipping his lid over this?
All right.
He's in a scene with them and he doesn't flip his lid.
I know.
He actually wanted to.
bet he did.
Later when he had more clout in the Trek universe, he said, I wanted to say something there, but I was too minor of an actor at the time, and I felt like I'd lose my role if I did. So he was not happy with the depiction of the Irish in that one either.
In case anyone is still wondering, we're talking about the episode where the Enterprise follows as a distress call, and they end up beaming up all of these people who would be dressed and acting and speaking like a stereotypical Irish poor person from maybe the 1800s, if that. And they find out that they were part of a second vehicle that was sent out that was all the more enlightened. Is that a good word?
Scientifically advanced.
Yes, that were running out of genetic material. They had been cloning themselves for a long time, but they really needed new genetic material. And so the solution was to bring the Berloidy in with, I can't remember what the clone people were called, together so that they could be used as breeding stock, which was a great turn of phrase.
I know, the episode, it goes from poorly written comedy to absolute train wreck at the end.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, we got Riker, who helps himself to the quote-unquote breeding stock.
Yeah.
Brenna Odell.
It's probably the most quintessential Riker gets a woman moment in Star Trek. I think one of the most interesting parts of that episode is a piece of comedy that got left in that was not in the script. When Patrick Stewart says to Jonathan Frakes, sometimes you just have to. Oh, I can't even remember what he said now. Sometimes you just have to. Anybody else remember? I had this in my
I
notes.
literally just watched this. Damn it.
Either
Come on,
way,
people in the comments.
it was meant to be said to Jonathan Frakes, and it was put into the final cut. It wasn't meant to be part of the script. So the episode is so self-aware at how bad it is at comedy.
Yeah.
But it's not even so bad it's good.
Yeah. I think I kept hoping for it to get so bad it was good, and
Yeah.
No, not even that one. There are some that we'll get to that at some point are so bad they're good. I think the next one that we had touched on, it's a little more minor in the Is Trek Funny? Voyager's Spirit Folk,
Literally just
which
watched
I
that.
think is legitimately funny. I know some people have a real
kissing a
problem with the
cow.
Fairhaven episodes.
Kim kissed a cow.
Right?
Exactly.
Just a cow.
There's some great little sight gags in there. The episode itself is only mediocre, but
Oh yeah.
It's still not a great portrayal of Irish people, but it's better.
I
Yeah.
look at it as I can forgive the fact that it's not a great portrayal because we're talking people generating something on a holodeck years in the future. So, and Voyager itself explored a few times the concept that how we remember history isn't necessarily how history happened. Like the episode where the doctor is brought back in a museum, like his backup, and he goes through and he tells them this is not how things happen. Like you're remembering it wrong. Or like Janeway with the Millennium Gate, she didn't, So that one I kind of forgive them the cringy parts because I'm like, okay, they're generating content based on what they know or think they know. And him kissing a cow, I mean, come on, that's the most action he got in the whole series, other than that one alien chick. So
Right.
at least he didn't get in trouble for that one.
Yeah.
True.
staying in the realm of Voyager, which I know Scott isn't always...
I actually watched the episodes you listed this time. I jumped
Okay,
ahead.
great. And neither of them, I think, really... I don't think they cloud any of the other stories that you need to watch in between. So
Not at all.
Bride of Chaotica.
Yes.
Right?
One that is definitely played for laughs, but for me, I don't find it all that funny, but I do love the classic sci-fi parody that they're trying to do there.
Yeah, the serialized 1930s era adventure story. It's really well done, actually, I think.
I find the language funny, like how over the top it is, you know, when Tom's trying to coach Janeway, who
Yes.
I mean, Janeway has a bit of a sense of humor, but she's fairly straight-laced as a captain. You know, and Tom is trying to coach her on this stuff, like you need to use grand language, flatter his ego.
It's ray gun, not phaser. It's imagizer, not view screen.
Or like Tuvok actually has one of the funniest comments to me when you hear the robot walking around and Tom's like, ugh, Satan's robot. And Tuvok's like, naturally. Like,
I'm just
or Seven ripping out the robot's guts when it gets in her face. She just can't stand it, so she opens it up and rips it out.
Hello,
Can everyone hear me this time around?
We sure
Yep.
can. If you can turn it down a smidge, that'd be even better.
Oh, okay. All right.
I can turn you down
Little's
a smidge
enough,
if you need me to.
finally. Is that any better?
That's way better.
I think so, yeah.
All
Okay.
right. We just finished up we're still talking about Bride of Chaotica, and I will post the list for you in just a moment.
Miss out on most of the fun there.
Yeah, we've already talked about Up the Long Ladder, so if you want to get in anything about that and the Space Irish.
I want to. how are we feeling about the long ladder? Do we think it's actually funny?
No. I think
No.
for me, the
No?
only
No?
funny
Okay.
moment I saw in it is when the little girl comes out of the transporter room, picks up the chicken, and looks at Picard and walks away. That's it for me.
Yeah. Okay, that's
Yeah,
funny.
and I got like a little bit of a chuckle when what's his name there? Who's the name of the leader of Odell? Like, what's his first name?
Oh, I could not tell you all the names of these
Yeah,
kids at
me
all
either.
after all the
But, like,
episodes we
you
went
know,
through.
Yeah, but like Worf shows him the replicator and he replicates whiskey and tries it. It's like, no good. Then Worf replicates something else and has him drink it and he pulls this
Bloodline.
major face like.
No, it was something
Oh.
else. It was something I didn't recognize.
It was
Yeah,
definitely
I
something
didn't know what that
like
was. It
alien
looked
drink.
steamy though.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was steaming.
Yeah, and he's like, "That's the good stuff."
Is everybody here into
That's
like
not-
steamy
that's totally-
drinks?
that's
I've never
totally true.
done that.
Huh?
No.
Does everybody
Uh,
here like those steamy drinks? I don't like them. Whenever
Like
I
the
go
ones
to
with the
bars.
dry ice in them.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Around Halloween, I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
That's
I think
that's
that's
kind of
definitely
fun for Halloween for sure. Anyways,
Alcohol that's
I
steaming to me is
pers-
like hot toddy when you're sick. That's it. I
that's-
associate
okay.
them with being.
I see. Yeah, I felt like that episode was way too sincere to be funny most of the time. Though I did find having the children like having I thought it made for okay drama with Picard and it kind of showed his mettle as a leader. Having to take over this band of children and make them walk up all these holodeck stairs. I'm so sorry. That is wrong. Not holodeck stairs. Elevator stairs. Well, what else would you like me to catch up on, by the way, before we get too far?
We
Spirit folk.
had talked about Spirit Folk and Bride of Chaotica in
Yep.
Voyager.
Okay. Yeah, I really can't even remember Spirit Folk at this moment after going through all these episodes this week. So I guess it's a good thing I just missed out on that.
Did you see the one where Kim kissed a cow? It's that one.
Oh, well,
Fair
yeah. The
haven.
less we have to say about that one, the better, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there
Where would
was
you all
another
like to-
comedic beat in
What's that?
that episode, and it was when Janeway goes into the character file and changes Michael's stats to make him more what she would be into, like make him smarter, make him taller. That I found kind of funny too.
That was the previous
Yeah.
episode of.
Oh, never mind then. Sorry.
I mean, that you can totally be a funny moment. It was just that was a few episodes before
Sorry.
because we
kinda
had
felt
to
bad
go
for
to
him.
that seaside town twice within 10 episodes.
I actually felt
I
bad
think
for the
Star Trek-
holodeck character, her
Oh.
changing him weirdly enough. I'm like, why would you change him like that? You're playing God. There's no fun in that.
I like when we get kind of a peer into Ray's thoughts and like her fantasies as a character because she's so strict and authoritarian a lot of the time. It's nice to see her kind of cutting loose and to see what makes her happy.
True.
Yep.
But the whole thing kind of comes off as elementary Dear Data light because you have these holodeck characters, they're not like as sentient as Moriarty is, but they know something's going on and they go immediately to superstition because they're not nearly as technologically advanced.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point there.
Although
we can
Moriarty was
move on
created
to-
by accident, like because Geordi
Oh.
had the slip of the tongue there.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
okay. I totally forgot. Thank you. Would y'all like to move on to Prophet and Lace?
Oh,
Didn't get to watch, but I know it. Oh boy,
I
do I know it.
just watched it last night, and
Oof.
I gotta say, going into it, I was gonna be like, no, this is another example of Star Trek failing at comedy hard again. And actually, the first half is legitimately funny, especially the acting Grand Nagus joke.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that stuff is good. I think there's a little bit of theatrics that get on my nerves with all the screaming from the Grand Nagus. He just has a very high pitched voice, and I can't. Wallace Shawn plays him, and he does such a good job. Like, I'm not taking trying to take anything away from his performance, but it is incredibly intense and loud a lot of the time, and it almost kind of foreshadows the very loud humor we would be getting on the first season of Lower Decks in that sense.
That's
I
fair.
will say I do like the little bit of almost feminism that they do try to push into that episode, because we know the Ferengi are pretty Middle Ages patriarchal there. And Quark and Drag, I mean, to me, it felt a little bit like watching Bugs Bunny as a kid. Because how many times did Bugs Bunny put on drag to get in or out of a scrape? And I have to say, like, to me, Quark looks like his Moogie right there.
I think the Bugs Bunny thing ages better than this does because Bugs Bunny is a great actor who really can con people into being attracted to him, whereas Quark is very awkward and uncomfortable. And watching the scene where the Grand Nagus is attempting to have his way with Quark is just so intense for a minute. Like I was like, they really could have just cut like maybe a minute out of this, and we would have all gotten the point. We didn't need
It
to
wasn't
do
the
this.
Grand Nagus, but
Oh, right. I'm so sorry. But anyways, yeah, I'm forgetting the name of the character, the head of the cola company, the head of Slurm Cola, is it?
Sluggo Cola.
Nilva.
Sluggo.
Drink Sluggo Cola, the slimiest cola in the
galaxy.
galaxy.
Yeah, that got a good laugh out of me. Yeah, that
That
is funny.
picture right
I like
there. That picture right there, have you guys seen the meme where it's like Star Trek when I'm watching it and it just shows like a plane scene, and then it's like Star Trek when my mom walks in and it's that picture? Although I will say, like, Quark being really uncomfortable and awkward, it would make sense. Like Quark, because Quark has such a natural aversion to the concept of females being
Yes.
anything intelligent. So if he would have been natural in the role, it wouldn't have worked because it would not be Quark.
Yeah, you're probably right on that level. Though it would be interesting to see Quark like embrace a side of himself he never knew. But I feel like that would be making Quark way too progressive, way too quick.
Yeah,
it might lead to the episode being slightly less awkward from over time. But yeah, it probably wouldn't make sense with who Quark is as a character. I'm trying to think. There's all
Rom might have done better at being natural.
Yeah, I kind of like all the stuff with Nog, like where he's very capable of showing Quark how he should sit and do all this stuff. I'm sorry, that would be Rom. I'm so sorry.
I think it too, wasn't this one of the one? I know this was an episode that was directed by Alexander Siddig, and even he said he didn't care for, like, he said if he could go back and do it again, he wouldn't do the episode because he said he didn't even like the episode.
That's fair.
Yeah,
Sorry.
It's okay. No, let's go ahead.
I have a very, very different view of this episode as a trans person.
Okay.
When I was young and saw it, it gave me the idea that just because I was born a specific gender didn't mean that that was the only thing I could experience the rest of my life. So that was good. But playing a full-on medical transition for comedy crawled under my skin, especially when I was in my early 20s and still trying to figure out how I was going to live my life in a different gender and how that was going to look. And the fact that they went like super over the top, like extra feminine with Quark, And that they also made a point more than once to say that he had surgically become a woman.
Right.
And I feel in a lot of ways I suffer from transmedicalism bias because I haven't medically transitioned. And so so the idea that it's just such not a big social issue, like I could see in Star Trek Future, medical transition, whatever, but that there's the only social impact is humor. That there's no, like, maybe there was somebody who wasn't in on the plans who sees Quark in full drag and has a reaction to it. And a not humorous, not funny reaction. I still think it's played for humor. And I think in the 80s, it was probably funnier than it is now.
90s. DS9 was
Yeah.
90s.
Yeah. But
It would
like,
have been funnier in the 80s.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But and I can see how it's funny. Like, don't get me wrong. It's just there's some underlying messaging in there that I would warn other trans people about before they run in thinking it's a funny episode.
Right.
That's my point.
Yeah, that's definitely why I said I think the first half is funny, and as soon as he transitions into, you know, female Quark, it's all downhill.
Lumba. That's, I mean, even that alone.
Yeah, that's right. That's the name.
Like, it's played for humor, but
Unfortunately, though, too, in Star Trek, they pretty much, we've seen they use surgery all the time. Like, it's, to them, it's nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing to do a procedure. It's nothing to reverse a procedure. Like when they made Deanna Troi a Romulan and stuff like that. Like, to them, surgery is nothing in the future. Unlike now, where, I mean, I have a friend who's transitioning and just like learning about all the things that can, like all the different paths you can go and everything. It's like I could see definitely the mixed feelings and stuff. To be honest, when I saw this episode, I was in my late teens because I was watching it in syndication, but it was still like the late 90s. And I was in a very small town. So the words like transgender and stuff like that didn't even exist in my realm of knowledge. It wasn't until I got older that I rewatched the episode, and then I'm like, oh, okay, now I see why it's a thing. Because growing up, like I didn't even run into people who were LGBT, and in a small town, you just don't.
I was the only one in my little town, so I know all about that.
Yeah, it's not like I was deliberately naive. It just didn't exist to me. It was just not part of my reality. And then I saw it later as an adult, and I'm like, okay, on one hand, it can be funny. On the other hand, I could see somebody getting really upset by this.
Right.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I think drag queens are hilarious when they want to be funny.
Yeah.
And I think in my own head and in my own feelings, I feel like I can laugh at this episode if I look at Quark as a drag queen.
Yeah.
If I ignore the whole part
Right.
about how he was surgically transitioned and he was just putting on over-the-top clothing and jewelry to appear female, I probably could have gone along on the funny journey. But once it became he was female and they cut his ears short and all of it, that's when I started not liking it as much.
And considering, I was just thinking too, in the Ferengi culture, the ears are considered like erotic.
Yep.
So you just,
Oh,
It's like
I
when
didn't
you
think
cut
that
off
till-
Bender's antenna, you know?
yeah. That's almost genital mutilation. Ooh.
Well,
Yeah.
it's not that dissimilar. I'm not going to
point.
get too graphic, but it's not that dissimilar for some trans men who have bottom surgery. That's all it is.
Yeah, no, I didn't even think of it till you mentioned the ears, because I forgot they changed Quark's ears for that one too, because all you see is the giant chunky earrings. But on the other hand, I will say one thing I did like was Quark getting a sense of just how the females are treated in his culture.
I did
And
like
how
That's very
absolutely despicable it is that they treat their women that way.
And at the same time, Armin Shimmerman has come out and saying later that he hates how the episode ended just because Quark never learned anything moving forward. You never see that come back.
Mm-hmm.
true.
Yeah, because later on he gives Moogie a hard time.
Okay, I'm a bad DS9 fan because I can't think of the name. Jantara. That's the word I was looking for. He plays a woman in the Jantara, and he's less upset by it, maybe. Well, he doesn't play a woman. He's imbued with the spirit of one of Jedsia's former hosts, who happened to be a woman, and he's sitting there brushing her hair, doing a very feminine thing. And although he still voices that he's uncomfortable with it, he doesn't throw a fit. He doesn't walk out. And part of that is because he's got a thing for Jedsia. But I also hope, in some way, it shows a little bit of growth in Quark's character.
Right.
To go off topic for just a second, I was just thinking this morning, like, I hope in Disco Season 5 we get to see Adira Tall's Jantara. I think that would be cool. And then I question, can Gray even be part of that outside of the real Gray coming back, since Gray isn't part of the symbiont anymore? I don't know.
Oh.
Let's keep moving with comedy.
Yeah.
Gray is another thing entirely.
I want to say I probably watched this episode about 2 times before I had to watch it for this show. Let me tell you, I turned it off about right after he got surgery because I just knew it would be terrible. I just had a gut feeling about it, and then having to watch him go through all that for the first time, very weird. Very weird vibes. I would like to move on to the genuinely funny episode featuring Ferengi's Little Green Men, where where Quark finally gets a ship that he's been owed for about 10 years, and he ends up sending them all back in time because the warp on it is messed up, and they have to use the chemosite to try to offset the warp, and they end up becoming the Roswell aliens. And there's a very similar Futurama episode that's just as good. And please tell me how you feel about this, gang.
Oh, I love this one. The line that always sticks out in my mind is when he sees the army generals smoking or whatever, and he's like, "Wait a sec, you mean these people, they do this and they know it's gonna hurt them and they pay for it? I'm gonna like it here." He's just, he's hit Ferengi paradise as far as he's concerned.
I think the funniest trope in that episode is Nog being sort of the expert because he read one book on Earth once. And so when he says, "We're going to invade over here in Cleveland." Yes, Cleveland. And I feel like that it's a common comedy trope, but I think in Star Trek, it serves a very specific funny role.
Yeah.
About this idea that he wants to go to Starfleet Academy, but he doesn't really know where Cleveland is.
Yeah.
I also like the follow-up there that Cisco is now Gabriel Bell.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not comedy, but I love that follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy this episode. Go ahead, Scott, please.
I love when they're trying to understand each other, and the Ferengi realize their universal translators must be a little messed up, so trying to adjust them by hitting themselves in the head. And the humans are watching. What are they doing? And they start imitating them. The Ferengi what are they doing? It's they're imitating us.
Yeah.
Actually, I find that part interesting because, we're so used to the idea in Star Trek that other than in Enterprise where we would see a lot of issues until they could communicate properly, we're so used to Star Trek, they just show up and they can understand each other and everything. So getting to see them where they don't know, that's probably what scientists would do if they ever found aliens they couldn't communicate with, is try and imitate them to try and see if they could establish a dialogue, because even among humans, 90% of communication is not verbal.
I really want to commend this episode for getting the tone of their speaking voices just right, because they sound old-timey without being extremely parodical in a way that's dumb. They sound like actual people while still being these 50s stereotypes. The Doctor refers to his best gal and stuff like that. The General's pretty funny as well.
Yeah, but they don't have the old-time radio voice.
He blows up on Quark. What'd you say, Scott? Sorry.
I said, but they don't have like the old time radio voice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll send the coppers after you.
I like how Odo
Okay.
gets in and out of this episode too.
yes,
That was kind of amazing.
yes,
yeah.
Odo is great in this episode. Though
I feel like
agree
it's
with
one of
Cork, he
the
does-
few Odo reveals that actually surprised me.
Mhm.
Like usually you can figure out Odo's the bag or Odo's the chair, but this time I had no idea.
Nope, this time Odo's the dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. That one surprised me
Yeah.
too, because it's like, where did Odo learn what a German Shepherd looks like?
I never thought of that.
he read about it. He read about it in the book Nog left on the ship. He
Probably.
had to pass time somehow and figure out what to
Well,
do.
I mean, if the military is rolling out a dog, clearly they had a dog, and Odo must have replaced it, so he probably sampled it on contact.
Oh
Are
yeah.
you implying that our military at Roswell had a little dog that hung out and was like a Beetle Bailey style character that got into
A German
shenanigans
Shepherd is no
with
little
everybody?
dog.
That's true.
No,
And German
Shepherds are
You're
pretty
right about
common
that.
in
You're right
military
about that.
and stuff.
Yeah, German Shepherds are typically used for military and for police canine because they're, well, some of them are quite huge and they're extremely trainable.
I'm very
I'm-
focused. Like a lot of dogs are like, just pet me, whatever. But German Shepherds
Yeah.
have that laser focus.
Yeah, they're like a
I'm-
collie with a flock of sheep.
I absolutely need to apologize to everyone because for some reason I'm imagining this as a much smaller dog. I'm so sorry.
German Shepherds, you've seen what my dog looks like. German Shepherds are about the same size as my dog. They're well over 100 pounds usually, and they are muscle. Like, they are
Yeah.
not small dogs.
Yeah.
When he first transforms, even Odo, like the dog gets up on Quark and like his
On
paws
the
are all the
shoulders.
way up on his shoulders. It's no
Yeah.
small dog.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they're huge.
Now, I do agree with Quark, though. Odo had no evidence to take him in. This could literally just be a story that Odo is spinning, because he doesn't like Quark, but he still takes him in, even though he has no actual evidence to prove any of these events. The other two are not going to say anything about it because they don't want to get in trouble. He has nothing to go off of.
Yeah, classic Odo and Quark.
That does fit Odo, though, too, because there's one time where Cisco wants him to investigate something, and he's like, I'll question the usual suspects and Quark. And Cisco goes, well, what does Quark got to do with this? He goes, I always question Quark.
Yeah.
I mean, I swear Odo wouldn't be half the character he was without his nemesis.
Mhm.
For sure,
And it brings
for sure.
levity to a character. Like Odo was written super, super seriously. And to give it, like, that's one of the things about Trek humor in general, is even when it's not good, it's obviously they're trying to take a break from the real, like, life and death or highly technical or, you know, and other episodes so people don't hate the show. So people don't go like, you know, I think that's why sometimes Discovery gets the reputation it does, is because they don't really lift the mood for a minute. It's just everything is ending all the time, no matter what. Very few times do we divorce ourselves from this plot line that the world is ending or the universe is ending.
Right.
Really, the only Discovery character that puts in much humor in, I found, was Georgiou.
Yeah.
With her her sarcasm, like when Michael says, you know, go back to your Viper den, and she goes, things like that, or, you know, using big words doesn't make you scary. It means you own a dictionary. Like, she was really the only one to throw humor into that.
Yeah,
They
I know
were-
we didn't have. Sorry, Eve.
No, so my brain just left the station. Go ahead.
I know we didn't have this one on our radar, but I just got thinking when Del mentioned Disco. Does Disco have a comedy episode? And I'm like, no. Sanest Man Go. It's the sanest man gone mad. Goes
The only
mad.
episode I would consider rewatching. Yes.
Give me a synopsis because I
It's-
don't know the name.
It's
Magic
where
to
Harry
make the
Mudd
sanest man go
comes
mad.
and it keeps going in a time loop and he destroys the ship like 60 or 70 times.
Oh, right. Yes, I remember.
I
There's
got
so
to
much
say,
good humor there.
I'm
I
such
have
a
to say,
Harry
Rain
Mudd
Wilson
fan.
did the job good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Rainn Wilson as Harry Mudd, and Harry Mudd is one of the few like kind of rogues in Star Trek history that isn't like trying to destroy planets or anything. He's just trying to make a buck most of the time, and he'll
Yeah,
do
he's
anything to
he's
do
just
it. And it's-
Quark.
Yeah.
yeah, he kind of is Quark, but he also doesn't have the guise of being an established businessman. Like he's so disheveled
Right.
all the time. Like Quark
Mhm.
has a veneer of class about him, whereas Harry Mudd, just whenever he walks into the room, you know that guy has no class whatsoever.
He's a slime ball, and he's not the brightest. Like
No.
comparing him to, like, say, Okana one has some honor, and Okana is actually fairly smart, but
Mhm.
Harry Mudd is kind of like he's like a wannabe at what he does because he's never really successful. He's just like, the galaxy slime ball.
For
And
sure.
I mean, when they brought him into the show, my first thought was, who are they going to cast as Harry Mudd? Because that's not an easy character to, recast, because the original actor does such a good job at, he just oozes sleaze.
Yeah,
Like,
right?
even when
Oh,
I saw
yeah.
that episode of the original series with Harry Mudd, like both episodes, I'm like, oh, like, the second he shows up, you're just like, I don't know why, but I don't like you.
I
Speaking
mean,
of
like
Okana,
the original Harry Mudd had a harem, and that like is probably about as sleazy as you can get.
I do like that he got defeated by his own robots.
Yeah, that was cool.
Mhm.
Hardcore.
Hardcore spitting mud. You drunk
drinking again?
Yeah. And then and Kirk turns them all into Stellas.
Mhm.
So you mentioned Okana a moment ago, Eve. Do we want to take this opportunity to move into that one?
Yeah, I
Well-
was kind of thinking that needs to be like a big central focus of this episode.
The outrageous Okana.
There
I would
is
just
a
like
lot
to
of
save
attempted humor.
time. I'd like to save time because I wrote out some notes comparing it to the Orville episode Priya.
Okay.
They have two very similar plot lines, one not so funny and one funny, or trying to be funny, but I think one is more successful than the other, and I'll let you figure that out until it's my turn.
That's actually kind of the way with both episodes. They got their
Yeah.
serious plot line and their funny plot line. Yeah.
Which all the stuff with Okana I kind of find funny anyways in like a weird tropey manner. Like he just pulls off so much shit while he's on the Enterprise. Like he
Yeah.
beds probably 3 or 4 women just walking around. I know we talked about this earlier on a different podcast before, but it's still just funny to me that there's a character in Star Trek who's just so loose about having multiple relationships going on the ship at once. I mean, I know they're just like very like one-time flings for him, but I feel like Okana is the type of guy that maybe tells a woman he loves them more often than not, more often than he ever should.
I mean, he's just a more over-the-top Riker, and in fact,
Mhm.
the role of Riker came down to that actor and
Yep.
Frakes.
I
Funny
did
thing
not even
is-
realize that. That's awesome.
Yeah, he
Funny
was the
thing is,
number
like,
2
even-
choice.
Even watching Okana when I was a teenager, I'm like, I could see how the women are falling for all over for him, because he, unlike like Riker I never found Riker charming. I found Riker
Charisma
almost
plus 10.
Riker was almost predatory to me in some ways, but
Oh
I
my
always
god.
just his attitude. I don't know.
Yeah,
He just had a
yeah.
bit of an attitude. Whereas Okana, he's charming, and I mean, quite frankly, most women would, hook up with Okana knowing it's just going to be a one-night rodeo type thing. But he's
Or
not
specifically because it's a one-night rodeo type
Right.
thing.
well, that, and he's not disrespectful to the women. He's very, even afterwards, he's still very charming. Like, I can see why women like the bad boy, and he's a bad boy, but he's a safe bad boy, if that makes sense.
There's a
Yeah.
scene with Riker in the episode with the Irish people, and like when he kind of when he first meets the daughter of the head of the Irish people and they have this little conversation, he just like stares at her for like half a minute, and it's just so uncomfortable watching
Yeah.
him like stand over this woman. And she kind of starts like playing into him a little bit, and it just feels weird. Like it just feels like there's such a power thing happening there, and there's no addressing it in any way. It's very strange. I don't know why that's supposed to make Riker a desirable like leading man. Very
Yeah, I don't.
odd.
I never found Riker like. To me, he's to me it was like I do not get why women find Riker attractive, but Okana, I can totally see why women would be attracted to him. Like, heck, I was attracted to him when I first saw him. I'm like, well, no, this is a guy. This is a man.
There you go.
My partner
I
off
kinda
screen commented, "Slimy" was her comment
Yes.
for Riker.
I kind of like the idea of him like being Riker because I just feel like he'd be a little bit snarkier in a way and be kind of pushing against Picard a little bit more. Like he wouldn't be treating him with so much reverence. I like this idea. I wish that had kind of happened actually.
Now that you mention it, yeah, Riker kind of does idolize Picard, and Riker was always on the trying to be on the fast track to command. So sleeping around every other planet they land on, how does that fit with trying to get fast track to command? You'd think he'd behave himself a little bit more.
Well, it's a certain type of like getting a fast track to command, but the type he's actually talking about all the time. Like I think Riker probably has some dominance issues as well, and he likes to express that with his lips.
You know he has dominance issues. Angel 1. He was more than willing to wear that ridiculous outfit and have a woman dominate him. So
Yeah. I think also he has some things he needs to express all the time, and he needs people to help him do that. And I don't want to try to look down on Riker too much, but yeah, he doesn't keep the decorum he needs to become a very big Starfleet. It's very strange.
Yeah.
All right.
Would y'all like to move into maybe like talking about Lower Decks a little bit? I can't remember.
There was one episode up at the top of our list here that we didn't start before you came in that maybe we should take a look at. Plato's Stepchildren.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I just think this thing is so uncomfortable, and if it's intended to be like a sad, like pure camp humor, I think it fails because it's so uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah, I can see how they're trying to make it funny, but when it's all under the guise of torture and loses it more than a little bit, even when Kirk and Spock are dancing around each other and singing.
Yeah, I just feel no humor in this at all. It feels like somebody really getting off on forcing other people to do their will, and that's like where the only humor lies in it. And I just feel like it's mean-spirited to that degree. Like this whole episode is, I would kind of get what would be a good thing for a science fiction writer to use as a premise, because if you have these people and they're ageless, they've been developing psionic power for untold years. I can't remember actually how many years they had been alive. Is anybody possibly not okay?
I didn't like Plato's Stepchildren, to be honest. It's one of those ones that I watched it once and I can't bother to watch it again. It's just awful. And I mean, I'm not even saying awful in the context of looking back at it, 50 years later. It's just plain awful. Like,
yeah, like even
I
back
remember,
then, I don't think that.
Well, I asked my mom, I'm like, was this normal for TV or something? Like, this was this considered humorous in the 60s? And my mom's like, no, there's nothing funny about that. She's like, it's just, it's bad.
It does have a couple of nice moments. The stuff with the dwarf is good between him and Kirk. The very ending's okay. But even the interracial kiss, the big
Yeah.
thing that the
Yeah.
episode's known for. It's the most uncomfortable kiss in Star Trek. Even it's not good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not the first interracial kiss on TV.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
No,
Yeah,
it's
no.
not.
Can't claim that.
I'm glad it isn't. Like,
Yeah.
I'm glad it isn't.
I believe it has the distinction of being the first one in prime time, though. I
I don't
might be
know.
wrong there.
Oh,
But I think it
okay.
was the first one to ever be displayed in prime time.
Right.
And that's what people usually say about it.
Yeah.
I see. I really think the acting is pretty to do some of the things they pull off. It seems hard. Like when they bend themselves backwards and like walk backwards. I know there's probably a little bit of tape manipulation there to make that seem faster and what have you, but it seems like a lot to ask an actor to continually do these sudden jerky motions for however this stuff. Like the actors themselves seem like they're in an uncomfortable position. I really don't find any humor in most of it. I just wish they'd done something else with it.
Honestly, they remind me of like 1970s zombie films, like those B zombie films when they're doing the whole thing like that. I mean, that's just the impression I got. Like, it makes me think of Army of Darkness or something, like the way they move all herky jerky like that.
Right. Army of Darkness.
And I mean, I kind of get bothered by the fact that I'm going to use the term little person here because I know some people find the term dwarf offensive, even though medically they call it dwarfism. But having, pardon?
Alexander did refer to himself as one.
Yeah. But I mean, having him, played as the jester and he's the one that they play for laughs, kind of problematic there. I mean, considering there has been more positive portrayals pre-Star Trek using little people, like you look at The Wizard of Oz and the Munchkins were literally a group of actual little people, but they're not portrayed for laughs or anything. They're portrayed as an entire race of people that just are short. So I kind of got bothered by the fact that they had him as like the joke for the court and everything.
But you have to also keep in mind that we're not quite out of the Freaks era yet.
Yeah.
First of all, historically, people who were deformed, including little people, were more often to be jesters than to be people who were.
Yeah.
And the other thing being that I lost it. Sorry, I had another point and I lost it.
I know a lot of them had to work in like quote unquote freak shows. Like that's how P.T. Barnum made his bloody fortune. And it's interesting because this week I was on some forum I was following. I can't remember why. And the discussion, it was one to do with medical, like unusual medical things. Don't ask why I get into the stuff I do. But I was on this forum and they were talking about, stereotypes of people with different deformities, I guess you could say, and the most common one they said is the fact that even now, when people think of, say, little people, very few of them think of what's his face. I can't remember his name in Game of Thrones. They tend to think more of minstrel shows and that they work in entertainment and people still hire, little people for party entertainment is still a thing apparently in some places. And so that's what this episode just made me think of was like, I thought this episode when I was in the forum and I'm like, even now, like it's still a thing that they get portrayed that way. But I thought it was interesting that apparently we're like you said, we're not past that era yet. And then somebody was like, people still hire them for party entertainment. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like I do remember a scene in Dodgeball, the movie, where he's like looking at his obscure sports magazine and the cover actually says midget tossing. And I'm like, what? Like, how is that a sport?
Right.
I mean, I did see a Cirque du Soleil a few years ago where they did have an actress who was a little person in the show. And part of the reason she was cast was she was the one who could fit in this prop that they were using because they needed her to be inside the prop.
Oh,
Kind of like Kenny Baker was in R2-D2.
right.
But yeah, it was just really interesting that they still end up often entertainment in some form or working entertainment. Sorry, my mind goes in weird places.
That's right.
That's all right.
So, I think some of the other things we had here to talk about. Actually, we don't have much left to talk about. Some minor stuff in TNG, like the episode "Disaster,"
What's that
where
one?
It's
this
the
was one you
one
brought up
where
with the kids trapped in the
Turbolift.
turbo lift.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they're trapped with Picard.
Mhm.
Yeah, the whole episode, it's not a comedy episode, but is this part even meant to be played for laughs? At first, I didn't think so, but when you get into the Frere Jacques climbing song and stuff, it seems like it's meant to be played for laughs, and like a lot of Star Trek, it just falls flat.
Yeah, I can see that.
Hard to say. Like, I think you could be right, because I can't see because TNG wasn't really known for, the couple people in a room episodes. That wasn't really their thing. And those episodes tend to be the ones that were played for laughs, where everything takes, like Bride of Chaotica and Voyager, where it's supposed to be for laughs. But I mean, yeah,
There's moments where they reach for the comedy. I don't know if they always get there. The little kid always mentioning his radishes, turnips,
Yeah.
radishes. The little girl answering to number one at the end of the episode. There's all these little like cheeky bits kind of stuck in. Well, yeah. Sorry, my partner said, and Picard having to deal with children, which of course is it's going to be that awkward comedy that's more in line with something like The Office, where you just put someone in a really uncomfortable situation and watch them like wheedle their way out.
I mean, the kid with the radishes, to me, that's just normal kid behavior for his age, because kids that age do become obsessed with whatever's currently on their mind. I mean, I've got one student right now about that age, and if it doesn't have dinosaurs, don't bother him. And everything is about dinosaurs. So, I mean, the kids act pretty much like kids would, but Picard I'll be honest, it's a good thing Picard never has children. That guy would be a horrible parent in a long line of Star Trek horrible parents.
Yeah.
Wow, that should be a topic someday. The horrible parents of Star Trek. There's
Half
plenty
of it
to
would
choose
be
from.
worse.
And Annika's parents, they'd be up there for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Crusher. I know that's controversial, but I think Beverly Crusher is a bad mother. Because she cares more about her career than her son.
I can see that, for sure.
And she spends more time showing affection to Picard than she does her son.
That's true. That's also
true. There definitely could have been humor. There probably should have been humor here. If it wasn't written in mind with humor, it should have been, because that was the situation we put Picard in. And it was neither interesting nor funny.
See, I feel like if they had buttoned it a different way, the entire episode would probably read differently. If it was like a heartfelt moment between like Picard and Crusher, where Picard says, you know what, kids aren't so bad after all, like that would have fit sort of the narrative of most of the episode. Whereas having like the little kids come out and present a plaque, like I felt like that was kind of trying to jam in one more kid joke.
Yeah.
And it didn't work.
No.
The whole thing was just awkward.
Speaking of one more kid joke, the other thing we have to talk about is TNG Rascals.
Yeah.
Something definitely played for comedy at times.
And they almost got it too.
Almost. You almost want to laugh, but I don't think I ever laughed, even the first time I watched it, or just watching it a few days ago.
And to be clear, there are episodes that we didn't get to because it wasn't something that jumped to mind. Whereas now I can think of a couple that we didn't even address that are funny all the way through.
Really?
So people who are watching should know that these are not our entire selections of comedic or non-comedic episodes.
Right.
To me, this episode was more about Ro at the end, because we got to see some reasoning behind why Ensign Ro is the way she is, and her asking at the end if she can stay a kid a little bit longer. But to me, I always think of this episode as the Ensign Ro episode, because
So that's a different episode with children. This is one where children from the Enterprise who have parents on the Enterprise entered a science fair and won. You're thinking of the one when Guinan and Ro and Picard
we
turned into kids.
We moved over to that one, actually.
Oh, then I missed the transition. Oh well, sorry.
Yeah, it seemed like there was a natural transition. I was like, we should move over to Rascals.
Yeah, no, I was looking. Yeah, I'm looking at
little rascal, yo.
Yeah, I'm looking at the picture, and Rascals is the one where the big rigs on Enterprise become kids.
Yeah.
And Ro is the one, and the whole time Ro has a huge problem with it. And Guinan looks at her and says, "That's because you never were a child."
I think Alexander's the funniest character in that episode.
I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And his jokes are played straight, so they're really good coming from kids.
Very true.
I mean, seeing Picard as a kid is kind of funny in a weird way, because he still has a stick up his butt, but
yeah, he's like, I want to see my dad now.
There's one of the good examples of, well, it's supposed to be funny, but it comes off as just petulant and like, oh, like I almost want to laugh, but it's just not there.
Yeah.
So we've run out of regular episodes. The only other thing we had to maybe talk about was, and Del had brought up real quickly, Priya from the Orville.
Yep.
Can I do episode to episode comparison with the Outrageous Okana?
Please do.
They're very similar.
All right. So I watched them back to back because they have very similar setups. Both of them start with a rogue who shows up with plans that are hard to figure out if they're good or bad. And they trust them in the beginning. And in one of them, it pays off, and the other one, it doesn't really. But the core of the comedy part is about artificial life and comedy.
Yes. And
so both of them, the Outrageous Okana has this plot line where Data and Joe Piscopo have like a 5-minute meeting in the holodeck, and then Data's surprised why he hasn't gleaned comedy from that yet. But he tries, and he tries with Guinan, oddly played by a better stand-up comedian than Joe Piscopo. And she tries to kind of get him to understand a kind of humor he'd be better at. Like, Data would suck at Jerry Lewis humor. But if we're giving him bon mots, if we're giving him witticisms, if we're giving him anything that's like language oriented, then I think he'd be better at it than trying to do pratfalls and cigar jokes. Meanwhile, Isaac walks into the bridge one day, and he's wearing all of the Mr. Potato Head pieces. And Gordon lets everyone know, like, I did it. It was a practical joke. And Isaac's like, I don't understand. And so Gordon gives him an even shorter joke or shorter lesson on what pranks are. And then we don't really hear or see anything about it for most of the rest of the episode. They're dealing with Priya, who's come from the future to do bad things, like always. But when they get back, the way that we know the plot has continued is because Gordon wakes up without a leg. And so they're trying to both encourage him to continue to prank, but to find that line between potato head pieces and a leg. Yeah. So in a weird way, I think the Outrageous Okana, Data's Data's impetus is he wants to understand the humanity of comedy. It's something that humans get that he doesn't. And so he's kind of seeking this out independently. And like, granted, he's been lost on many, many jokes at this point, but like, he wants to understand it for himself. Isaac wants to understand it so that he can understand humanity in a more research way, which is why I think instead of like going into their version of the holodeck and taking a lesson, he just goes ahead and tries.
Yeah.
I think that also shows a little bit of the difference between Star Trek and the Orville. Star Trek tends to play serious topics and then try to kind of shove comedy, even in the ones that are mostly comedic. They still have like, you know, Stardate, we're doing this very serious thing, and all of a sudden Data's telling jokes. Whereas on the Orville, it's still a very serious plotline. That's not fair.
Sorry.
Can you put up a picture of Bortus with the porn stash?
Yeah.
Thank you. I said it was a porn stash on a site and got kicked out.
Really?
Yeah. But the Orville, they do it much more subtly. Like the first time I think I remember they do, I'm pretty sure it was in the pilot. It was, you could tell it was a setup for what their brand of humor is going to be, because Captain Mercer was talking with someone on screen. You're on a planet or something, and in the middle of the conversation, in the background of this guy's house, his dog is sitting on the couch licking himself.
Yeah, and the
He's
first
like,
thing
okay,
they
this
say,
is what we're doing. That's good. Okay.
Yeah, and this is the first thing they say when they get off the call. Did you notice the dog licking its balls? Yep.
Yeah.
As a dog owner, I can say that has happened where my dog has just walked in the room, sat down, and started licking herself at the weirdest times.
Yeah, and they do it so well. Like one of the funniest scenes in Priya is when Mercer and I think it's also Kelly and Alara are confronting Priya about what she did. In the middle of conversation, Gordon's missing leg falls out of the ceiling.
I feel like that the approach to comedy is different in that the Orville build itself from the beginning to be like a slight parody.
Yep.
But what they do is they take an outrageous concept like I only pee once a year.
Yes.
And they play it as serious as the actors can handle it, with only a few like in that funny moments, but it's hilarious. Whereas Trek tends to go for more slapsticky humor when they go for humor, and when they kind of generically aim for humor and sometimes miss and not, I think it's because they don't mix the seriousness with the funny. Like, do a funny thing that everyone is very serious about.
Yeah.
Rather than, let's do everything serious, but Data wants to tell jokes. So that's how I saw sort of both of those episodes. Also, one last thing. The Orville relies heavily on modern day to us references. Mercer has a Kermit the Frog on his desk. Yes. They listen to Billy Joel. Like, even like the movies they watch, and granted, we've seen that with like Enterprise, where they had the movie night and they were always old movies. But I feel like the referential humor in the Orville is modern, where the referential humor in TNG or in Star Trek in general is just older humor. It's written by older people who are trying to kind of live within a system that was built in the 60s that now has to exist in the 2020s. And so they get a little bit more stuck. I also think Seth MacFarlane is a comedic writer, and the writers of Star Trek are not.
Yes.
That was my point about Priya versus O'Connor.
Is it a little bit away from the pre-episode specifically, but because Bortus is on the screen. One of my favorite Bortus moments is when they're all doing karaoke in the lounge, and he gets up and he says, you know, I was asked to do this song, and it was one of the, I can't remember who asked him to do it, but he's like, I was asked to do this songs and everything, and he's all serious, and then you hear the opening strains of Titanic. And I'm trying to imagine him, like, because I work for a karaoke company, like I'm trying to imagine Bortus singing this song with all seriousness, and then they cut it off. And to me, I think that was a good choice because on one hand, just the idea that he would have to sing that is funny, but we don't, if he had sung it, it wouldn't be funny.
Yeah.
Like, we seem to know where to stop the joke, which is funny to me because when you look at Family Guy, how many times did Seth MacFarlane beat his own jokes to death?
Yeah, that's true.
Like the chicken, how many times did that stupid chicken come back? It got to, like, anytime I saw a chicken episode, I was like, I'm out of here. I'm tired of the chicken.
Or just yeah.
I think that was one of my big worries too with Orville was, okay, it's Seth MacFarlane. Is he going to beat his own jokes to death? Is it going to be all like potty humor? But I have to admit, he's done pretty good with it.
Mm-hmm.
He's managed. It reminds me kind of like Futurama, but live action in a way, like just the style.
So,
And I think over time it has grown so that it's not Seth MacFarlane, the guy who wrote Family Guy's Star Trek show. It's actually its own show at this point with its own humor and its own point of view. And I think that's good. And I think it has a lot to do with Seth MacFarlane being the guy in charge.
Absolutely.
That would make a really
love
funny
that image.
display.
so we
if I
spent
had
a
to
lot
get-
of. Go ahead, Eve.
Oh, I was gonna say, if I had the energy, that picture of Isaac would make a good cosplay.
So before we wrap up, we've spent a lot of time tearing down mostly the terrible humor of Star Trek.
Yes.
Let's talk about a show that has, I think, done tremendously well at making Star Trek funny.
Oh yeah.
Now, some people have their own thoughts on Badgie himself and whether Badgie is funny or interesting or a good character, but the show itself, taking all the satirical angles that it can at Star Trek, I love it, love it, love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So much.
I can't wait for the next season of Lower Decks.
Mm-hmm.
What does everybody here specifically think of Badgie? It's too bad Robbie isn't here because I know he doesn't like Badgie, and we really could have gotten a nice, heated discussion going.
Right.
I'm kind of meh. Like, he's funny, but then sometimes I don't find him as funny as I think I'm supposed to.
He's funny, but he's an a-hole.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
He's supposed to.
he's an agitator, and it's not going to be boring when he shows up.
Oh,
But he's definitely like, I mean, we've had holodeck characters go rogue before, but he's like a special breed of like a-hole. He's an a-hole and he's proud of it and he's happy to be an a-hole. Unlike, say, Moriarty, who was created by accident and Moriarty's actions fall within what the character would be like.
Mhm.
Badgie doesn't really have a reason for being a hole. He just is one.
I just love the concept of Badgie. The holodeck safeties are off. Let's go. We've done it so many times in Trek. The reference and the concept of it are great. I can see why people might not like the character, but I think Badgie's excellent.
well, I mean, he's gonna burn your heart in a fire, so
Yeah.
I will burn your heart in a fire.
leave us alone, Badgie. No.
I think he belongs on a shelf next to two other AI who are sitting on a shelf together.
Hmm.
I just think Badgie would be a very interesting development in that plot line.
Yep. I mean,
Yeah,
for all
I-
we know, maybe
my
the
God.
remnants of one of the Texas class computers that's a cousin of Badgie is there.
Mm.
Yeah.
I'm imagining Badgie hooking up with Peanut Hamper and Jeffrey Combs. I can't remember the character, but Jeffrey Combs' evil computer into like some unholy trinity of
Artemis.
evil. Yeah. The unholy trinity of evil.
What do you guys think is the best comedic bit of Lower Decks? It can be a moment, it can be a whole arc.
I liked the I forget what they called it, but the Dungeons and Dragons episode. I think as an as a role player,
Yeah.
it hit all of the right points for me.
Yeah.
I can't remember which episode it was, but it was the one where it went way out to left field. They were going through the ship, and it was almost like they were all drunk or something, and we end up seeing like Boimler's parts blacked out and things like that.
I
Oh,
experienced.
yeah. Yep.
I can't remember what episode that is, but that one
I
had me,
excretus.
yeah, that one had me laughing my ass off the whole time because it was just so ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they get their little funny moments in too when, like right in the pilot after Boimler's been all gummed by the giant spider, Mariner's like, Doc will wave a light over it. Let's go.
Or like the
Or in-
captain, protect that slime.
Or in like the least dangerous game when Crunch talking about his prey. Boimler was like, well, what's the third type? There's a small lizard type creature that doesn't really apply to you.
Or how the captain allowed Boimler to be hunted.
Yeah.
That was good. Cranch, that's a different story.
Crunch, that's it.
I can't walk by a package of Cool Ranch Doritos ever again without thinking about that character.
Now I want Cool Ranch Doritos, thanks.
I hope you have them.
Nope. I don't feel like walking through like 2 feet of snow to get to the corner store.
That's fair.
We have one final question before we wrap up. Who do you think is the funniest character across all of Star Trek?
Quark.
I'm going with Murph. He is the comedic relief.
Yeah,
He's meant to be played for comedy, and even when it's really stupid, silly stuff, he always gets a laugh from me every single time he's on screen. So, funniest character.
I'd say Murph or Quark.
Yeah.
I think for very different reasons.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, because the first time I ever saw Armin Shimmerman in anything was obviously Buffy. Seeing him as like the, awful principal, and then seeing him in Star Trek, I'm like, hey, wait, he can be like funny?
Oh, you mean
He's
you
not always a
didn't
jerk?
see him back in a couple of random episodes of Beauty and the Beast?
Huh?
Has
Was
nobody
he
ever
in
seen
the
that?
Beast?
In a couple episodes, yeah.
Okay.
With what's his name? Oh God, War Never Changes. The actor that says that in Fallout, and he was the lead in Beauty and the Beast.
Ron Perlman.
The TV,
Yes.
yes. Ron Perlman, and I want to say Sarah
He looks a
Connor.
little confused.
That's not
Beauty
her
and the
name.
Beast was actually a TV show back in the day.
I don't know
that's
that.
what-
Yeah,
that's
I know,
what we're talking about.
I didn't know there was a TV show for it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
so
a very
bad.
much a
I think
romantic.
George R. Martin wrote for it.
Yeah. It has so much talent that you'd recognize. It stars Ron Perlman and
Linda Hamilton.
Sarah Connor. Yeah, Linda Hamilton. You've got great writers, a ton of Star Trek extras and people that you'd recognize that come in, as recurring characters, and it's not good.
Yeah, no, I didn't even know there was that it was made into a TV show. But I mean, the original movie, like the cartoon Disney movie, came out when I was just like barely in school, if that.
This
So
premiered just a couple years before that, in the late 80s.
then I would have been wearing a diaper, so I wouldn't have known.
Can we mention what topic I want to talk about next week now?
I was going to in the end, but if you'd like to sell your own topic, please do, Deb.
Dell's selling himself.
Yes. So I just want to mention at this point in time that next week we're going to be talking about aging in Trek. Personally, as someone who is facing a big birthday coming up, I've been thinking a lot about aging. And I noticed that lately when I've been watching episodes that deal with aging, they are always in abject fear. And I want to talk about that some. But I wanted to bring it up just since we were talking about you being in a diaper, and I can remember
Yay!
like how much I was drinking then. So
You sound a little bit like my husband. We'll go to like a store and I'll be like, I remember rocking out to this tune when I was like in 8th grade. And he's like, I remember drinking to this in the bar. He's got, him and I have a bit of an age gap. So that's what you reminded me of there.
Does anybody else have anything else they'd like to throw out about the comedy of Star Trek or the Orville?
I will say one thing. I don't know about funniest character. Data kind of has his moments when he's trying to be human, but I don't know if it's just because of the age I was when I first watched Generations. But a couple of times after his emotion chip was installed. Yes, exactly.
Precious little life
Like,
forms.
Yeah, like there was that. They did that well, and like when he had his first drink, he's like, "Yes, that is it. I hate this."
I actually like his line in First Contact when he's like, I think I speak for all of us, Captain, when I say, to hell with our orders. And then you see him with the phaser rifle and he's like, saddle up, lock and load.
I love that he's usually the funniest when he's not trying to be.
Yeah.
Like, I can't remember the episodes, but there's one where it's like, say goodbye, Data. Goodbye, Data. He doesn't get it. It's hilarious. And it's great. And there's a bunch of times in the first couple of seasons, and they don't come back to it until Generations again, but where there's like an adult joke that starts being told and then it gets cut off. There once was a woman from Venus who had a body shaped like a Data.
The Kirsten Anderson in the cargo bay reciting an unusual limerick. That was the episode, I think, where they were like all drunk.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank our panelists for joining us today, and all of you for watching Buffer Time. If you're entertained, please consider a like and subscribe. Join us next week as Dell talks aging. We'll catch you then. Peace and long life.